Hello, my name is Randy Silva, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 19th issue of the Rochester Business Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Customer Relationships Still Drive Family-Owned Monroe Tractor After 75 Years by Kevin Oklobzija. When Henry Hansen traded a life in farming for selling agricultural equipment back in 1951, one business belief towered above all others: treat the customer right and business will grow. Today, 75 years later, Monroe Tractor has blossomed from a husband-wife team to a dealership with 340 employees working out of 18 stores across 5 states. The principles, however, remain the same. What my grandfather said is still true and is still the foundation of who we are as a company today, said Laura Wilkes, Monroe Tractor's marketing director and part of the third generation of the ownership family. Those guiding principles extend to the employee base as well. It all starts with taking care of the people that take care of our customers, said Chris Folowski, the company president and grandson of Henry Hansen, who died in 2014. Headquartered just off Leahy Station Road in Henrietta, Monroe Tractor provides equipment, service, and parts to farmers and construction companies. Case and Case IH are their predominant agricultural brands, while products made by the Wirtgen Group help meet the heavy equipment needs for road builders. But while big machinery comprises a significant portion of the revenue stream, it's the little things that define the company, starting with a personal greeting customers at the door and on the phone. We're still very much a relationship business, Chris Folowski said. Customers want to call us and have a live person answer the phone, he said. They also appreciate that Chris and his mother Janet Folowski, the firm's CEO, are in the office and willing to talk. I remember being shocked when a customer would stop in and my mom's door was always open. She would always take the time to see them, said Wilkes, Janet Folowski's daughter and Chris's brother. She has an open-door policy, and that's with customers, that's with employees. The Folowskis believe it's what helps set them apart from the competition, and what's enabled them to be in business 3/4 of a century and remain family-owned and operated. Not that there aren't challenges. It's how you confront those hurdles that ultimately make the difference. When a part fails on a $750,000 piece of equipment on a dairy farm, the farmer certainly isn't buying a new machine, he just needs it fixed. You go in knowing every day will bring a new set of challenges, Chris said. People come to you with problems, and sometimes they're major. When you find a solution, it goes a long way. They remember. Then there's the family dynamic. It takes a lot of work to be able to communicate with your mother and your boss and your brother and your boss, Wilkes said. When I'm in meetings, I refer to my mom as Janet. I have to treat her with the respect that everyone else treats her with. And I can't talk to my brother like he's my brother. You have to put the family part of it aside. Each brings a different element to the management table. That's especially true for Janet Folowski, who began working for the company in 1972. We all have our strengths, so we complement each other, Wilkes said. My mother has such valuable insights and so much history, where things started and where we are now. Chris and I would never be able as knowledgeable as we are without her having that background and support and being able to apply some of her back-in-the-day thinking. Some of those ideas and thoughts of doing it a certain way help solve the problems we're having currently. Monroe Tractor's business is divided into 2 divisions, agriculture and construction. The ag customers are professional farms as well as part-time farmers. Construction clients range from highway builders, municipalities, gas and utility firms, and home builders. Between 60 and 70% of revenue is derived from equipment sales, with parts, service, and rentals filling out the balance. Chris Folowski, 49, decided to join the family business in 2001. He had been working at Paychex. At the time, Monroe Tractor had 7 stores. Every 5 years, he would move into a new role. He needs to learn everything about the business, his mother said. Along the way, he believed expansion was important. That's why there are 18 Monroe locations today. 13 in New York, 2 in Massachusetts, 1 in each Pennsylvania, Vermont, and Connecticut. Some of that growth came through the purchase of smaller, private dealerships. If they didn't have a succession plan, I wanted to be their option, he said. Opportunities came about from the company's reputation. Monroe was presented with acquisition opportunities in New England through one of their equipment manufacturers. That was very much an endorsement of their abilities as a dealer. Planning for the future is a non-stop task for Chris Folowski. How do we become more efficient? How do we become the best distributor of construction and agriculture equipment? Often that answer is the same: by being who they have always been. We try to sell Monroe Tractor, Janet Filowski said. It's who you become to the customer. A $19.5 billion data center and statewide pause. What's at stake in Genesee County? By Andrea Deckert. As New York lawmakers voted to impose a one-year moratorium on new large-scale data center development, a proposed hyperscale facility in Genesee County has become a flashpoint in a broader debate over energy consumption, economic development, and the future of artificial intelligence infrastructure. The legislation, passed by the state legislature on June 4th and awaiting Governor Kathy Hochul's signature, would temporarily halt permits for new data centers with peak electricity demands of 20 megawatts or more, while the state studies their impacts on energy prices, water resources, and the environment. Supporters say the pause is necessary to ensure New York's grid communities can accommodate the rapid growth of AI-driven infrastructure. Critics argue the move could deter investment and create uncertainty for developers. It's a polarizing issue, said David Flynn, leader of Phillips Lytle Environmental Law Practice Team, who has advised data center project developers in the Genesee County Economic Development Center. Flynn said the debate reflects competing priorities, with some stakeholders focused on the economic and technological opportunities presented by AI, while others raised concerns about the scale, energy demands, and environmental impacts of large data center projects. Although he supports additional review and transparency, saying they could foster great public understanding and dialogue, Flynn described a moratorium as a very aggressive way to manage that process. Capital for these projects is available now, but uncertainty equates to risk, Flynn said. He warned that prolonged uncertainty could push developers to pursue projects in other states where approvals can move forward more quickly. Flynn also questioned whether the proposed pause would truly last only 1 year. He noted that some of the studies called for in the legislation are expected to take up to 18 months to complete, raising the possibility that development could remain stalled for significantly longer. We are likely to see extensions, he said. Stamp project draws scrutiny. The debate comes as a proposed hyperscale data center campus at the Western New York Science and Technology Advanced Manufacturing Park, STAMP, in Genesee County faces increasing scrutiny. Developer Stream Data Centers, backed by New York City-based Apollo Global Management, is seeking some $1.46 billion in sales tax and mortgage recording tax abatements for a roughly $19.5 billion planned data center complex in the town of Alabama. The Dallas-based firm has plans to develop a 3-building, 2.2 million square foot data center on some 90 acres at the local site. The company said the project will create thousands of construction jobs required for the project's multi-year build-out and some 125 permanent jobs at the site. Stream also operates and builds hyperscale facilities in major technology hubs including Dallas, Phoenix, Chicago, San Antonio, and Atlanta. A recent report from the Applied Economics Clinic, commissioned by opponents including the Tonawanda Seneca Nation and the Sierra Club, questions whether the project's projected economic benefits justify the scale of public incentives being requested. The analysis argues that Stream's cost-benefit calculations lack sufficient supporting documentation and fail to adequately account for potential impacts on property values, tourism, public health, infrastructure, and utility rates. The report also challenges the company's job creation estimates, concluding the project could generate thousands fewer temporary jobs than predicted. Perhaps most notably, the report suggests the value of the requested tax incentives could exceed projected community benefits by as much as 25 to 1. The project's energy requirements have also emerged as a major point of contention. According to critics, the proposed campus would require roughly 500 megawatts of electricity, about 4 times the current generating capacity operating in Genesee County. More than 300 residents attended a public hearing on the project earlier this year, with many expressing concerns about environmental impacts, infrastructure demands, and long-term community benefits. Developers push back. The GDEDC issued the following statement after the moratorium vote. We will continue to move forward with our normal process on this, and the company will continue to move forward with whatever permit applications that it needs, said Mark Mass, GCEDC President and CEO. It's business as usual until we hear something different. GCEDC officials have strongly disputed the findings of the Applied Economics Clinic's report, describing the analysis as flawed and misleading. The Economic Development Agency maintains that Stream would be required to meet specific job creation benchmarks or risk losing incentives. And, under proposed agreements, Stream projects the development would generate more than $550 million in property and sales tax revenues over 30 years, including annual payments to Genesee County, the town of Alabama, and the Oakfield, Alabama Central School District. Stream management declined to comment on the proposed moratorium, but a company spokesperson and the local facility could set a new national benchmark for environmentally responsible data center development. When complete, the team expects it will be the most sustainably designed, environmentally conscious data center in the U.S., the spokesperson said in an email to the RBJ. Their hope is that this facility could become a new industry standard for responsible data center development. Side effect of NY auto insurance reform: costly lawsuits to prove damages, by Kevin Oklobzija. Bringing to trial personal injury lawsuits arising from auto accidents will be more expensive and require a great deal more investigative work now that New York insurance reforms have become law. Consumers are expected to see a savings on insurance premiums thanks to a passage of the legislation that was aimed at reducing fraudulent claims. But John Richmond, CEO and co-founder of personal injury law firm Richmond Vona, LLC, said persons legitimately injured in an auto accident may face greater hurdles when seeking compensation. Everything was advertised as, "We want to lower your car insurance rates," said Richmond, a 2002 graduate of Greece Athena High School. "I'm like everyone else, I want my rates to be lower too. But litigation costs and fraud in car accident cases are only one factor that contribute to higher car insurance premiums. The repercussions," he said, "will be felt by, quote, people who are legitimately injured in car accidents," end quote. That's because of three major changes in the law. Elimination of the 90-180 rule. Under the old law, a person legitimately injured and not at fault, who couldn't go to work and perform normal duties for at least 90 of the first 180 days after an accident, could seek compensation. The lingering issues could have been because of a concussion, certain sprains or strains, or even the exacerbation of old injuries, said Richmond, whose firm is headquartered in Buffalo and has an office in Rochester. Elimination of the 90-180 rule makes it much, much harder for law firms like mine to get justice from the other insurance company for these people, Richmond said. Maybe they offer us pennies on the dollar. They say, "Go ahead and sue us." Now it's even more litigation. No more comparative negligence. Before the new legislation became law on May 26th, a driver deemed to be more than 50% responsible for the crash could still recover compensation from the insurance company. "We believe that's really fair," Richmond said. "If you're in an accident and your injuries are deemed to be worth $100,000, but you are 60% at fault, you can still recover $40,000. Now, if a driver is deemed to be more than 50% at fault, there's no compensation. This will lead to a great deal of time and expense spent on investigators and accident reconstruction experts in order to determine percentage at fault," Richmond said. "It can be one of these close calls at an intersection or two cars merging," he explained, "and they say this person is 51% at fault, so then there's no recovery. That's it, period. You can be permanently injured, but there's no recovery. That means a great deal of advanced work before a firm even agrees to take on the case, followed by the deployment of investigators and experts. The determination of fault is already a back and forth between the insurance company and our law firm or another personal injury law firm," Richmond said. "In the past, they, insurance companies, would concede things. I'm guessing now they won't be conceding as much because we have to prove this. Ultimately, there will be more lawsuits. You're going to leave it in the hands of a jury to decide who's at fault, which is why, now more than ever, it's really important that you're careful about the law firm you choose. Make sure they work with the best investigators, the best experts, with the best resources." Non-economic loss is capped at $100,000 for a person committing or fleeing from the commission of a felony, or if operating in an uninsured vehicle. The example Richmond used: if you're injured in an accident and you're 0% at fault, you're sitting at a red light and get rear-ended at 70 miles per hour by a drunk driver. If you don't have auto insurance at the time of that accident, there's a cap on your damages, Richmond said. Now, we've all been in this, whether it's car insurance or something else. You tie a credit card to something and it's on auto pay and your card expires and you miss the email that's going to your Gmail and you totally miss the notification. If your insurance has been expired for 1 month, just 1 minute after 1 month, there's a cap on the amount of money you can recover. There's no cap on economic loss, but for pain and suffering, it's $100,000, even if you're paralyzed from the waist down. So what will the new law mean for drivers? Consumers should see a reduction in auto rates, although it may take 12 to 18 months. Florida and Georgia recently enacted auto insurance reform. The office of Florida Gov. Ron DeSantis announced that the 5 leading insurers in the state cut premiums by an average of 6% in 2025. In Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp's office said Allstate Insurance Co. trimmed rates 5% and Travelers Insurance went down 10%. Fleet operators have also benefited. The Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority saved $2.8 million in casualty and liability expenses, Kemp's office said. It stands to reason there will be some sort of savings in New York for municipalities, freight carriers, and even small businesses with a fleet of vehicles. But for personal injury law firms, and there are many just in Rochester, each potential case now will be scrutinized to an even greater degree. For certain people, we're just going to have to tell them, we can't help you. We used to be able to, but now we can't, and this is why, Richmond said. We want to help everybody, but we have to make business decisions. For the persons they can help, the net compensation could be reduced by the cost of the case. What's going to change in certain cases is the amount of money that law firms have to spend on investigations and experts to ensure that they can get justice for their clients, Richmond said. Ultimately, the way it works in New York, those expenses come out of the client's portion of the net proceeds. It doesn't come out of the attorney's fees. We're fronting the money. If a client wants to, they can elect to front all of the expenses. If you can imagine, most people don't select that option because they don't have the cash to lay out, and they're taking a lot of risk if it doesn't work out. If we front it, it comes out of their end, but if we lose, they don't know anything. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Rochester Business Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. RPO hires seasoned arts executive to lead next phase of growth, by Andrea Decker. As the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra pursues a more than $50 million campaign aimed at strengthening its endowment, expanding educational programming, and ensuring long-term sustainability, the organization has selected an experienced art executive with a history of managing multi-million-dollar budgets and securing major philanthropic support as its next president and CEO. Tanya McBride-Robles will assume the role August 17th, bringing more than 2 decades of leadership experience in the performing arts, most recently serving as the vice president of the expanded education at the New England Conservatory in Boston, where she oversaw the institution's community and digital learning divisions. The RPO Search Committee reviewed a pool of national candidates to find a leader with the ability to unite artistic, financial, and community priorities while mirroring goals set by the organization's founder. Tanya's combination of operational excellence, artistic understanding, fundraising success, and public-facing leadership experience makes her uniquely qualified to build on the RPO's strong foundational and guide the organization into its next chapter, said Diane Clarkson, RPO Board Chair. McBride-Robles will oversee roughly 40 administrative staff, managing an operation that presents 150 annual concerts and broadcasts serving up to 170,000 regional patrons. She will report directly to the RPO Board of Directors and serve as a direct collaborative partner to music director Andreas Dels and principal Pops conductor Jeff Tyzik. McBride-Robles succeeds Kurt Long, who served as the RPO's president and CEO for 9 years and announced his plans to leave the organization in March. I'm honored to join the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra at such an exciting moment in its history, she said. The RPO's commitment to artistic excellence, education, and community engagement is deeply inspiring. She said the opportunity was driven by several factors, including the orchestra's strong artistic reputation, experienced leadership team, financial and organizational foundation, and deep commitment to community engagement and music education. McBride-Robles, who is currently house hunting with her husband, is impressed with the arts and cultural scene of the region, from the Memorial Art Gallery and George Eastman House to the strong National Museum of Play. Rochester certainly has a cultural and arts value well beyond what you would expect from a mid-sized city, she said. I'm looking forward to exploring and seeing what Rochester has to offer. McBride-Robles is a classically trained singer holding a Bachelor of Music Education from the Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University. She earned a Master of Public Administration from the University of Maryland Global Campus and has served as Chief Operating Officer of both the Baltimore and Nashville Symphonies. In those roles, she managed major operational budgets up to $28 million, directed ticket revenue growth, secured 7-figure philanthropic gifts, and successfully negotiated landmark multi-year labor agreements. Additionally, she developed partnerships with community activists, encouraged audience diversification, and advanced cross-genre collaborations with local indie artists. McBride Robles also accompanied her U.S. naval officer spouse on international assignments spanning Spain, Bahrain, Japan, and Ecuador, where he served as naval attaché. The leadership transition comes at a time when the orchestra is in the midst of a $50 million plus comprehensive campaign to grow the endowment, expand the RPO's education and community engagement programs, and provide long-term sustainability. McBride Robles plans to focus on growing earned and contributed revenues, plus developing innovative patron experiences for audiences through endeavors such as expanding the RPO's digital footprint, as well as fostering relationships with other community organizations. I am excited to build on the distinguished history of this organization, which honors George Eastman's vision of the orchestra belonging to the community, she said. I look forward to working alongside this talented team to ensure the RPO continues to thrive and serve Rochester for generations to come. Rochester's small businesses face cost pressures and uncertainty in lending, by Corey Putnam. According to the latest National Federation of Independent Business survey, the Small Business Optimism Index fell to 95.3 in May, while uncertainty remained well above the historical averages. We spoke with Rochester area banking, accounting, and legal professionals about the challenges facing small businesses today and the strategies they're using to help them navigate uncertainty. Given the current economic climate, small business owners are facing pressure from many directions at once right now, said Mark F. Schuber, senior counsel and a member of the corporate practice group at Harris Beach Mertha. Schuber said many businesses continue to grapple with elevated operating expenses, including payroll, insurance, and rent, while higher borrowing costs have made it more difficult to access capital. Borrowing is still relatively expensive for small businesses, he said. Lenders are starting to tighten their standards, so that can often cause small businesses to be priced out of borrowing. In response, Schuber says Harris Beach Mertha is encouraging clients to focus on proactive risk management. Nowadays, we're seeing more customers come to us with their commercial contracts, or at least their important commercial contracts, in order to tighten the risk allocation and make sure the risk allocation is appropriate for their business, he said. He also recommends building flexibility into agreements, including pricing provisions and clear exit clauses that allow businesses to adapt if economic conditions change. Beyond contracts, Schuber identified cybersecurity as the most significant legal and regulatory issue facing small businesses today. Cyber threats are no longer big company problems, he said. They're everybody's problem. Schuber advises business owners to remain proactive, diversify where possible, and invest thoughtfully in technology and cybersecurity protections. At Community Bank, Anna Kloon, Senior Vice President, Regional Sales Manager, says small businesses continue to face a combination of cost pressures, economic uncertainty, workforce challenges, and higher borrowing costs. The biggest challenges small businesses are facing right now center around cost pressures, uncertainty, and access to both talent and capital, Kloon said. While inflation has moderated from its peak, many small businesses are still dealing with elevated input costs, from labor and insurance to rent, utilities, and inventory. Kloon says many small businesses have limited ability to absorb rising costs or pass them along to customers without impacting demand. Business owners are navigating questions around interest rates, consumer spending trends, and the broader economic outlook, she said. This uncertainty often causes them to delay hiring, expansion, or capital investments, even when there are growth opportunities, because they want to preserve liquidity and remain flexible. Kloon says Community Bank has responded by becoming more proactive and accessible while helping clients navigate a more complex financial landscape. At Community Bank, our focus has been on meeting our customers where they are, both in how they do business and how they prefer to engage with us, she said. We're investing in technology so our customers can bank where they want, when they want, while still benefiting from the personalized, relationship-based service of a local banker they know and trust. The bank has also expanded its presence in the Rochester market and increased its focus on Small Business Administration, SBA, lending programs, which provide government-backed financing options for qualifying businesses. We recognize that lending conditions have changed, and many businesses need more flexible solutions, Kloon said. That's why we've expanded our SBA lending programs, helping make financing more attainable for a broader range of businesses. The businesses we see succeed are the ones that stay proactive, lean on their networks, and take a thoughtful, forward-looking approach to growth, she said. Christina Stamatis, CPA, a partner at MMB & Co., says uncertainty remains a constant for small businesses, but the nature of that uncertainty continues to evolve. Small businesses are navigating a mix of workforce pressure, tax law complexity, and state-level uncertainty, Stamatis said. Talent attraction and retention remain uneven, with wage expectations and productivity balancing still in flux. On the tax side, businesses are trying to understand and take advantage of provisions under recent federal legislation, while also monitoring how New York may decouple from certain federal rules, creating planning gaps between federal and state outcomes. To help clients navigate these complexities, MMB & Co. has expanded its role beyond traditional compliance work. We've shifted from a primarily compliance-based model to a more proactive, advisory-focused approach, Stamatis says. That includes more frequent touchpoints, forward-looking tax planning, and integrating specialists, tax, accounting, and consulting around the client. We're encouraging scenario planning, including cash flow, tax exposure, and entity structure, and helping clients make decisions earlier in the year rather than after the fact. Stamatis believes that one of the most effective ways for businesses to remain resilient is to build a trusted team of advisors and use them strategically. Businesses that perform best are surrounding themselves with a strong core advisor group, a CPA, banker, and attorney, and using that team collaboratively, she said. Key strategies include disciplined cash flow forecasting, leveraging available tax incentives, and maintaining flexibility in cost structures. Warren Miller, business banking officer at NBT Bank, also says uncertainty remains one of the defining challenges facing small businesses today. Small business owners are navigating an environment that often feels like a moving target, Miller said. Persistent cost pressures, including rising prices for inventory, materials, fuel, utilities, and insurance, are squeezing margins and making it difficult to adjust pricing without impacting demand. Labor remains another major hurdle, with many businesses struggling to attract qualified workers and facing continued wage pressure when they do hire. Additionally, he notes that higher interest rates compared to the past decade are also impacting borrowing decisions and long-term planning. At the same time, shifting consumer spending patterns are making it harder to forecast revenue with confidence, Miller said. Many business owners are weighing critical decisions about hiring, expansion, and capital investments without clear signals on timing. At NBT Bank, Miller says helping clients navigate those challenges starts with building strong relationships and maintaining ongoing communication. At NBT Bank, our relationship-focused approach has become more important than ever, he said. Those discussions often extend beyond lending to include cash flow, planning, and long-term growth strategies. Miller says the businesses that continue to perform well are those that remain disciplined and adaptable. Small businesses that remain resilient tend to take a proactive, disciplined approach to managing their finances and operations, he said. They closely monitor cash flow and use tools like treasury services and lines of credit to improve liquidity and access funds more efficiently. Looking ahead to the second half of 2026, Miller encourages business owners to focus on planning rather than reacting. Be proactive and base your decisions on clear financial insight, not headlines, he said. Take time to understand your current position, update projections, and identify both risks and opportunities. Businesses that plan and prepare multiple scenarios are better positioned to adapt. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Rochester Business Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Entrepreneurs and small business owners, the importance of furthering your education. A Viewpoint by Angela Giorgione. When people think about entrepreneurship, they often picture someone diving in headfirst, learning through trial and error, and figuring things out along the way. While experience can be one of the best teachers, I've learned firsthand that continuing your education can make a tremendous difference in how quickly and confidently you grow as a business owner. At 20 years old, I operate 2 businesses, Mind Over Matter Personal Training and Angela's Sourdough Co. Looking back, I can certainly say that investing in my education played a huge role in helping me build both businesses and navigate the challenges that come with entrepreneurship. My education journey wasn't what some might consider to be traditional. I first started by attending a 4-year college, but after 1 semester, I realized it wasn't the right fit for me. I wanted something faster-paced and more hands-on. I already had my website built for Mind Over Matter and was eager to move quickly toward my goals. I asked the advisors of the 4-year program if I could graduate early, but the traditional structure didn't support that path. When I learned about the Glissano Institute for Business and Entrepreneurship, which offers a 2-year professional certificate in business and entrepreneurship, something clicked. I saw an opportunity to build practical skills while applying them in real-world situations. Instead of sitting in lecture halls wondering how the information might someday apply, I could immediately put what I learned into action, and the decision to switch changed the course of my career and my life. One of the biggest lessons I learned is that passion alone is not enough to sustain a business. You can be talented in your craft, but if you don't understand how to run a business, growth becomes much harder. For me, nearly every course I took provided something valuable. I learned about CRM, customer relationship management systems, communication, accounting, creative development, and relationship building. One thing that stood out about the experience was how practical it was. We were actually applying concepts in real time as opposed to just memorizing them. Accounting ended up being one of the most valuable subjects for me. I know that may not sound exciting to everyone, but understanding your numbers is critical as a business owner. I've heard many stories about businesses failing because owners didn't fully understand their financials. Learning how to read financial statements, manage money, and think strategically about finances gave me confidence. As an entrepreneur, if you don't know your numbers, it's incredibly difficult to make informed decisions. I was building my education concurrently with building my businesses. Mind Over Matter personal training came from a deeply personal place. Growing up, I struggled with health issues and didn't fully understand the impact nutrition and movement could have on overall wellness. Over time and with education, I healed my relationship with fitness and food. I shifted my focus towards strength, balance, and holistic wellness. Because of the changes I made in my lifestyle, I stopped struggling with many of the health issues I'd experienced growing up, including asthma and allergies that had once affected me regularly. That personal transformation inspired me to help others, which is how Mind Over Matter was created. Angela's Sourdough Co. came from another passion of mine, baking. I started the business after developing a love for sourdough and appreciating both its health benefits and the creativity involved in making it. Everything is homemade, intentional, and created with quality ingredients. I wanted to provide people with products that felt thoughtful and nourishing. Continuing my business education helped me avoid unnecessary struggles. Whether working on my own business ideas or practicing through projects like the Lozano Institute, I received constant feedback that shaped how I think and operate. I also believe soft skills are some of the most important things entrepreneurs can invest in. Technical skills can be learned often online through tutorials, but communication, emotional intelligence, leadership, problem solving, and time management are much harder to develop on your own. Education also helped me become more confident in making decisions. Through internships, networking opportunities, and regular interactions with business leaders, I gained real-world exposure that made business situations feel less intimidating. Technology is another area where continuous learning matters. Continuing my education has helped me use AI tools within my business and have basic coding knowledge that helped me while building my website. You don't have to become an expert in AI, but understanding technology basics makes running a business much easier. For entrepreneurs who feel too busy to continue learning, my advice is to make time for what matters. If growth matters to you, you will find time for it. Education doesn't always mean sitting in a classroom. It can mean meeting with a mentor, listening to podcasts, reading before bed, asking clients for feedback, or learning through everyday experiences in your business. For me, the return on investment has been priceless. Trusting my gut and choosing a path that aligned with my goals was not an easy decision, but it changed my life. As entrepreneurs, we owe it to ourselves to keep learning, because no matter how much experience we gain, there's always more to understand, improve, and grow into. Supporting and retaining your newest employees. Great Workplaces by Lauren Dixon. Graduation season brings a new wave of talent into the workforce. Here in Rochester, that means welcoming bright-eyed and motivated graduates from some of the best colleges and universities in the country. But as we bring these early career employees on board, it's easy to overlook just how much support they'll need to succeed. After all, they're not just learning their jobs. They're learning how to work, how to communicate, and how to navigate professional expectations for the first time. It's worth noting, too, that many of today's newest employees spent their high school and college years, a critical time for development, during the pandemic. Some missed out on in-person collaboration, some on professional communication, but all lost out on the pre-pandemic rhythm of the workplace. We found a new rhythm, but there's a gap among new employees that employers can't afford to ignore. It's not a lack of ability, it's a lack of exposure. The workplace skills that we once assumed, clear communication, professional etiquette, understanding hierarchy, managing expectations, might not come so naturally to this next generation. This isn't a criticism, but rather a truth that leaders need to recognize before building any sort of onboarding strategy. And yes, we need a strategy. The first 6 months. Research shows that as many as 1 in 5 employees leave their jobs within the first 45 days, and nearly 1/3 start hunting for a new job within 6 months. On top of that, most employees decide whether they'll stay long-term with the company within that same window. Needless to say, the first 6 months are a critical time for new employees. But if that's the case, why do some organizations treat onboarding as a 1-week orientation? How do leaders expect these new employees to retain everything that's been dropped in their lap over the course of 5 overwhelming days? It's that kind of welcoming that drives people out. There's a business case to be made as well. Replacing an employee can cost 6 to 9 months of their salary. And when more than half employees who leave cite a poor onboarding experience as a contributing factor, it becomes that much harder for business owners to ignore. Habits to break. The problem business owners have is that it's easy to fall into the same patterns. Failing to adapt is where so many go wrong. So start by recognizing the problems in your approach. For example, don't assume people will just figure it out. Without structure, early career employees don't feel empowered, which leads them to feeling lost. Also, don't rely on implied expectations. We may think we're being clear, but often we'll hold certain expectations that aren't immediately apparent. The same goes for the path forward, especially in smaller organizations. Just because these employees are new doesn't mean they aren't thinking about the future. If they don't see what's next, they're prone to assuming that growth can only come from leaving. It's a matter of clarity. Without it, your new talent will quickly become former talent. Habits to form. Great workplaces to work retain early career talent by taking a more intentional approach, one that builds confidence, capability, and connection from day one. For starters, they extend onboarding beyond the first week. When done right, the process answers more than, what do you do? It answers bigger questions like, what does success look like here? How do we communicate? What are the unwritten rules? I always prefer scheduling regular check-ins with a supervisor or peer mentor. These meetings can take any shape you or your employees want, just as long as they're creating structure. From there, good habits are easier to form. 1. Make expectations clear. How are new employees supposed to know what good looks like? Yes, they need to show initiative, but without properly defined expectations, there's no way for them to know whether they're hitting or missing the mark. Here's the flip side to that coin. Let's say an employee takes on a new responsibility after 6 months and immediately expects a raise or promotion. While ambition should be encouraged, it needs to be grounded in a broader understanding of performance, consistency, and long-term contribution. It's up to us to clearly define what the role requires, what exceeding expectations actually looks like, and how growth is earned over time. Going above and beyond once is great, but sustained performance, reliability, these are the qualities that truly set someone apart, and we need to make that obvious. 2. Prioritize early, consistent feedback. Everyone needs feedback, especially early career employees. Otherwise, they're left guessing if they're doing the work right, if they're meeting expectations, or even if they're on the right track. That's why regular check-ins are so important. With real-time guidance, you can create alignment and build confidence in your new employees. As long as the feedback is consistent and constructive, employees can improve much faster and feel more supported. 3. Show a future. Just because they're at the very beginning of their careers doesn't mean your new employees aren't thinking about what's to come. For many small and mid-sized companies in which upward mobility is limited, that might seem like a problem. But growth doesn't have to mean a new title. It comes in all kinds of forms. Learning new skills, gaining exposure to different parts of the business, taking on new challenges that go beyond their current role. No matter how you define it, there's more to career growth than a guaranteed promotion. The sooner you teach your new employees this, the better equipped they'll be for a promising career. I should mention that all of this is a shared responsibility. Business leaders need to set their employees, new and existing alike, up for success, but they too can play an important role in their own development. I'd argue the most successful individuals don't just wait for direction, they engage with it. Get your early career employees to embrace their curiosity, encourage them to ask questions early and often, and to be proactive in seeking feedback. Inspire them to find ways to bring value that goes beyond their job description. If they can consistently deliver while taking ownership of their learning, that's when they'll find real growth. But new graduates don't always see the growth potential here in Rochester. Instead, they run off to bigger cities in the hopes of finding better opportunities. I admire their passion, and local business owners should admire it too. That's why it's so important for leaders to make our companies, to make our hometown, as enticing as they can be. Here's the bottom line. We need to build an experience these early career professionals want to stay for. Yes, everything's changed. The workplace, the workforce, employee expectations, everything's different than it was 6 years ago. That's why we need to invest time and resources into nurturing our people. When they feel supported from the start, they don't just perform better. They stay longer, grow faster, and contribute in ways that strengthen the entire organization. And if every business in Rochester makes that kind of effort, they'll quickly see they're doing more than creating a great place to work. They're helping make Rochester a great place to live. The Art of Business Succession Planning, a 3-Step Framework. A Viewpoint by John Rizzo. While business succession planning may look straightforward on paper, the reality is anything but. The art lies in navigating real-world dynamics while balancing exit options with readiness both financially and emotionally. Every business and every owner will have a unique path, each demanding different level of time and preparation. Understanding the foundational steps in the succession planning process is essential to a successful transition. 1. Explore potential exit paths and timing. Depending on the goals and current state of the business financials, preparing for a transition could take anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Much like staging a house for sale, the business must be positioned attractively for the market, which often means shoring up financial and operational fundamentals. These factors ultimately drive feasible exit options and the timing of each. Selling to a competitor or industry buyer can bring higher multiples, but these strategic buyers will expect strong financials, scalable operations, and minimal owner dependence. Selling to an individual is often an alternative when business may not attract a strong strategic acquirer, although valuations may be lower. Bringing in an investment partner, though through a partial sale, is an option for business owners who want to drive growth and profitability to achieve higher multiples upon future sales. Selling outright to private equity often yields the highest valuation, but requires significant upfront preparation, including consistent profitability, strong business management, and systems optimization. Employee ownership through an Employee Stock Ownership Plan, ESOP, can be an effective option for companies with steady cash flow but limited appeal to traditional buyers, particularly in industries without recurring revenue, and may offer meaningful tax advantages when structured properly. Transitioning to family prioritizes legacy and continuity over maximizing value, often resulting in lower valuations and requiring owners to build retirement security outside of the sale of the business. 2. Optimize your financial picture and your value. Whatever the chosen exit path is, looks matter. Financials should tell a clear, credible story that withstands scrutiny and inspires buyer confidence. At a minimum, that means several years of consistent income statements, balance sheets, and cash flow statements. Equally important is the transparency in normalizing expenses so sustainable earnings are clearly understood. Beyond clean financials, owners can assess where the business is today and define where it needs to be by tracking key performance indicators, KPIs, to identify value drivers and gaps. Cost management measures should also be considered, with a keen eye on sustainability and predictable cash flow. But it's not just about profitability. Value is also closely tied to transferability of the business, and culture plays a meaningful role. Engaged leadership teams, clear decision-making norms, and shared values support resilience and continuity. Combined with sound processes and systems, a strong culture reduces dependence on the owner, supporting higher valuation multiples. 3. Maximize your budget and retirement plan post-transaction. Succession planning doesn't end at the closing table. A successful transaction usually results in a liquidity event, leaving owners with the decision of what to do with the proceeds and how to fund the next stage of life. This often represents a shift in thinking from investing in a business to protecting and sustaining wealth, a transition that requires thoughtful planning. Post-transaction budgeting and retirement planning helps align financial resources with lifestyle goals, income needs, and long-term security. Working closely with financial advisors, tax professionals, and estate planners ensures the business exit supports broader personal and family goals. The technical elements of succession planning provide an essential foundation for the deal, but bringing those elements together in a way that reflects an owner's goals, timeline, and values requires discernment. While the process is often emotional for business owners, the art of succession planning lies in applying objective judgment at critical moments, ensuring decisions are guided by strategy and outcomes that support both a business's legacy as well as the owner's next chapter. John Rizzo, CPA, is managing principal of the Greater New York region of Doran Mayhew Advisors, LLC, and a member of the firm's Transaction Advisory Group, where he specializes in growth planning, mergers and acquisitions, and family succession strategies. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Rochester Business Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. More Nick Rochester title connections: Leo Lyons on Hall ballot, Clement Star push. In 1984, a handsome young man with no coaching experience visited the University of Rochester campus to interview for an assistant's job on Mike Neer's basketball staff. Neer, the winningest coach in UR history, joked to me a few years ago that the candidate, a chap named Jay Wright, showed up at his Palestra office in bib overalls and bare feet, and I set him on the path to sartorial splendor. Neer, one of the wittiest men I've dealt with in my 5 decades as a scribe, had tongue planted firmly in cheek while recounting that first meeting. Wright, a George Clooney lookalike who would don GQ suits throughout his Hall of Fame coaching career, was a fashion plate from the start. Neer had nothing to do with that, but he had plenty to do with launching Wright's illustrious coaching career, which would include 2 NCAA titles at Villanova University and the mentorship of 3 players, Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, and McCall Bridges, who would form the core of the New York Nova Knicks squad that just ended the Big Apple's 54-year National Basketball Association championship famine. At every step of the way, Wright has lauded Neer, whose resume includes more than 500 wins and a Division III national title. He even referred to him as a genius. High praise, considering Wright spent just 2 seasons with him on the River campus. But those 2 years would impact Wright for a lifetime. He clearly paid rapt attention to the way Neer coached players and people, and he would, in turn, pass on that wisdom to each of his players when he finally landed an opportunity to become a head coach. The knowledge Wright instilled was on full display during the Knicks' march to a 16-3 postseason record, culminating with a 4-1 series victory against the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA Finals. Of the Knicks' Nova trio, none flew higher than Brunson, an afterthought second-round draft pick who was considered too slight of build and talent to be anything more than a career backup guard coming out of college. Wright felt Brunson could be a special player. He kept telling the scouts, "A guy like this can lead a team to a championship." Still, not even Wright thought Brunson would turn into a performance reminiscent of Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant. San Antonio's 7'4" unicorn Victor Wembanyama was expected to dominate, but it was the 6'2" Brunson who stood head and shoulders above all others, averaging 32.6 points, 4.6 assists, 4.2 rebounds, and a pair of steals per game to win MVP honors. His 45 points and a 94-90 win in Game 4 was a performance for the ages. And if you connect the dots, Brunson's ability to exceed expectations and squeeze everything out of his ability in order to will his team to victory can be traced to selfless lessons imparted by Wright, lessons he learned decades earlier from Neer. According to a Chinese proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that first step in Leo Lyons' induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame has been taken, thanks to the tireless efforts of Lyons' great-grandson, John Steffenhagen, and football author Jeffrey Miller, the former owner/coach of the Rochester Jeffersons and one of the NFL's founding fathers, is on this year's ballot for election into the football shrine in Canton, Ohio. He was also on last year's ballot, but his name was added so late that the voters didn't have enough time to give him serious consideration. Steffenhagen and Miller researched and wrote an award-winning book titled Leo Lyons, The Rochester Jeffersons and the Birth of the NFL. And if the voters, particularly the younger ones, do their homework and read the book, they'll correct this historical oversight and give Lyons his just due. He clearly was a man ahead of his time, not only joining the likes of George Hollis and Jim Thorpe to form what would become the world's most successful sports league, but also suggesting innovations that enabled the NFL to become king. His brainstorms included everything from conceiving the playing rules adopted by the league, to proposing divisions based on geography, to changing the shape of the football from a melon to an aerodynamic oblong that made passing easier to design the league's red, white, and blue shield. The Rochester native also was a pioneer in the integration of the sport, recruiting and signing the fourth black professional player, Henry McDonald, in 1912. Lions' collection of artifacts and ephemera from pro football's nascent days served as the foundation for numerous Hall of Fame exhibits and resulted in Lions being named the NFL's first historian in 1960. 3 years later, his idea for a pro football museum came to fruition in Canton, where the NFL was born. The aforementioned is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Lions' contributions. Again, if the voters would just take the time to read the book, they'll realize this is a no-brainer and correct this historical omission. Last week, I campaigned for Brighton's Ernie Clement to start in next month's All-Star game, and I'm happy to report that the early voting returns are quite promising. Monday's update showed the Toronto Blue Jays' second baseman atop the ballot with 904,702 votes, 3 times as many as the second-place vote-getter Ezekiel Duran of the Texas Rangers. Fans can vote online by going to the MLB.com website. There are several phases to the voting process, with the top vote-getters advancing in each round. Here's hoping Clement continues winning in a landslide and becomes the Rochester area's first MLB All-Star participant since Johnny Antonelli in 1959. There are other Rochester ties to the ballot, with former Red Wings outfielders James Wood of the Washington Nationals and Byron Buxton of the Minnesota Twins among the top vote-getters in their respective leagues. Wood, who's just 23, has followed up last year's All-Star season with a spring and early summer that's seen him club 20 homers and steal 13 bases, while batting a respectable .282. Buxton, now 32 and in his 12th big league season, is finally healthy and living up to the potential we witnessed during parts of 4 seasons with the Wings. Interestingly, Buxton has put up all-star power numbers with 23 home runs, but has only 36 runs batted in, underscoring the fact that he often leads off games with homers and how random RBI opportunities can be. He is on pace to surpass last year's career best total of 35 homers if, and it's a big if, he can stay off the injury list. Buxton has been beset with poor luck throughout his career, stymied by a series of torn ligaments, broken bones, and concussions caused by his pedal-to-the-metal play, and he has appeared in 100 or more games just 3 times. Best-selling author and nationally honored journalist Scott Petoniak is the Rochester Business Journal's sports columnist. Insiders like Musk, much likelier than public stock buyers to get rocket-powered returns, by Brad Barchester, University of Notre Dame. Elon Musk's SpaceX is becoming a publicly traded company after selling 555.6 million shares in what was the biggest initial public offering in history. But my new research suggests that investors who bought those shares are unlikely to see the explosive growth that the past IPOs had. The rocket, satellite, and artificial intelligence company said it raised $75 billion on June 11, 2026 in the offering, giving it a valuation of $1.77 trillion. SpaceX isn't the only high-profile tech company to be expected to sell shares to the public for the first time this year. Artificial intelligence companies OpenAI and Anthropic are also expected to list in the coming months in massive IPOs. For Wall Street, that means blockbuster deals with hefty fees for the banks involved. For early investors and executives, it could mean enormous paydays. For everyday investors, meanwhile, the question is whether a hot company going public today represents a good investment opportunity. What does it mean when a company goes public? For decades, an IPO marked the moment when ordinary investors could buy into a fast-growing company and share in its future expansion. Today, that moment often comes much later in a company's life, after much of the dramatic growth has already taken place behind closed doors. I study financial reporting, executive compensation, and initial public offerings. In a recent study of nearly 1,000 U.S. IPOs conducted from 2007 to 2022, my co-authors and I examined what happens in the critical period just before and after companies go public. Our research suggests that the modern IPO increasingly represents a chance for insiders and executives to cash out, not the start of value creation for public investors. IPOs used to fund growth. An IPO is when a private company sells shares to the public for the first time. Traditionally, IPOs helped young, cash-strapped companies raise money to grow. Investors supplied capital and shared in future success. Many iconic businesses, including Amazon and Apple, went public early in their life cycles. Much of their dramatic growth happened after they were already public. That pattern has changed. Research shows that the number of publicly traded U.S. companies has fallen sharply since the late 1990s. At the same time, private capital from venture capital and private equity firms has expanded. In our research, we document that the average age of a company when it goes public has more than doubled from 4 years in the early 2000s to nearly 10 years by 2025. Companies can now raise billions privately. They don't need public markets as early as they once did. What we found in nearly 1,000 IPOs, our research focuses on what regulators and practitioners call cheap stock. This refers to stock options granted to executives before an IPO at a share price far below the eventual IPO price. Stock options give executives the right to buy shares later at a fixed price. If the IPO price is much higher than that exercise price, the options are immediately very valuable. For example, say you're a CEO of a company going public. You receive stock options that give you the right to buy 10,000 shares of your company stock at a price of $2. The IPO price is set at $20. After the IPO, you could exercise your right to buy the company's shares at $2 and then immediately sell those shares for around $20 for a gain of $180,000. We examined nearly 1,000 IPOs between 2007 and 2022. On average, the IPO price was 5.7 times higher than the exercise price of options granted in the year before the IPO. In simple terms, executives often held options that surged in value the moment the company went public. Some of this difference may reflect real growth or the fact that private shares are less liquid, that is, less easy to sell than public ones. But even after adjusting for those factors, the gap remained large. This matters for future shareholders, namely those buying shares after the IPO. A substantial value has already been transferred to the insiders before public investors bought shares. Incentives to go public. We also found patterns in which companies granted more deeply discounted options. Companies backed by venture capital and private institutional investors were more likely to show significant gaps between option prices and IPO prices. This supports a straightforward incentive story. Some early investors want liquidity or investments that are easy to turn into cash. Granting executives options that become highly valuable at the IPO can help motivate managers to complete the offering. In that sense, the IPO often serves as a liquidity event, a way for insiders to cash out. That doesn't necessarily imply wrongdoing, but it does suggest the IPO now frequently reflects insiders' exit timing, rather than simply the public investors' growth opportunity. What happens after the IPO? The story doesn't end on IPO day. Our research shows that companies with a larger number of cheap stock options invested less in capital expenditures and research and development after going public. Cheap stock options provided less incentive for the company to take risks, and that in turn can affect a company's future financial prospects. Executives who already hold valuable stock options may prefer stable growth over aggressive expansion of the company. Since risk and reward are linked, companies that take fewer risks tend to grow at a slower pace, meaning future shareholders may see smaller gains. Our research supports this conjecture, as we found that companies with a larger number of cheap stock experience lower stock returns over longer horizons after going public. That matters for new investors who are not only expecting potential growth after the IPO, but also longer-run stock performance. For public investors, the takeaway is simple. Much of the explosive growth in corporate value now occurs while companies are still private. This article is republished from The Conversation under Creative Commons license. Read the original article at theconversation.com. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 19th issue of the Rochester Business Journal. Your reader has been Randy Silva. Thank you for listening.